All right, let's dive into the last three letters we have from the Apostle Paul, 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus. Now, we're going to look at these not just as ancient scripture, but as something incredibly practical, a troubleshooter's guide for keeping any organization, any movement, healthy and on mission, especially when it's under pressure from the inside. But right off the bat, we've got to talk about the elephant in the room. These letters are, well, really controversial. Their style, the vocabulary, even the content, things like having a more structured church leadership. It's all so different from Paul's other writings that a lot of scholars ask, did he really write these? And that's not just an academic squabble, it's a huge question that shapes how we read them. So the heart of the debate is just how different these letters feel. Some modern critics have really leaned into this, hoping to prove they aren't from Paul at all. Some even suggest they might be clever forgeries written in his name maybe 100 years later. That's a pretty big claim, and it makes it absolutely crucial to understand the context they were supposedly written in. And this timeline is key to the whole puzzle. You see, critics often say these letters just don't fit into the timeline from the book of Acts. And you know what? They're right. But that's the point. The argument is that they were written after the book of Acts ends. Paul was actually released from that first Roman imprisonment. He traveled again, was betrayed, arrested again, and then ended up in a condemned cell. This sort of lost chapter of his life is exactly where these letters fit. Okay, so picture this. We have an older Paul, and he's literally facing his own death. But he's not just worried about himself. He's looking at the churches he poured his entire life into, and he's deeply concerned they're facing their own kind of death. And not from some outside persecution, but from something much worse, internal decay. And this brings us to two very different case studies. First, you've got Ephesus. This was a more established church, but it had a huge problem. The wrong kind of people were in leadership. The rot was starting from the very top. Then you have Crete, which was a total mess. It had no established local leaders at all, and the general membership was, frankly, poor quality, reflecting the island's notorious culture. So two different churches, two very different but equally dangerous internal threats. So what does Paul do? Well, his strategy is brilliant. He realizes that just writing another letter isn't going to fix these deep, messy human problems. Instead, he sends in his most trusted people, Timothy and Titus, to be his personal representatives. His on-the-ground troubleshooters, sent to sort things out face-to-face. These weren't strangers. These were guys he'd mentored for years, preparing them for a moment just like this. Now, the biblical scholar David Pawson suggests the best term for them isn't pastor, but apostolic delegate. And this is so important. Their job was temporary. They were not supposed to stay and lead these churches forever. Their mission was to go in, fix the specific problems, set up a healthy local leadership structure, and then get out. You can think of them as high-level consultants brought in for a critical organizational turnaround. And Paul knew you had to send the right person for the right job. Timothy, who he loved like a son, was a bit timid. He needed constant encouragement for his really difficult mission in Ephesus, which was to fire the bad leaders and replace them. Titus, on the other hand, was a tough, no-nonsense Gentile. He didn't need a pep talk. He just needed clear instructions for his job in Crete, appoint the very first local leaders from scratch. So what was the actual plan? What was the blueprint these delegates were sent to implement? Well, it was a plan for building healthy, resilient organizations that could actually survive and thrive long after their founder was gone. Let's break down how it worked. The mission had three really clear steps. First, transition the organization away from depending on one charismatic founder to being self-sufficient with its own strong local leadership. That's a huge step for any startup. Second, you have to directly confront the people causing all the problems. No sweeping it under the rug. And third, you ground the whole community in sound, healthy teaching to protect it from bad ideas in the future. And the absolute foundation of Paul's plan was quality leaders. But look at the list of qualifications. It's almost entirely about character, not charisma or raw talent. Are they respected by people both inside and outside the group? Do they have their own life in order? Are they driven by purpose, not by money or ego? Really, the only skill-based thing on the list is being able to teach and communicate effectively. This is a radical idea, even today, prioritizing who a leader is over what they can do. Pawson uses this powerful analogy. Think about it. The goal of a great leader, just like a great parent, isn't to make people dependent on you forever. It's to build them up so the organization gets strong and independent on its own. True leadership works itself out of a job by empowering other people. But it wasn't just about the leaders. The blueprint also demanded quality members. The core idea was to adorn the gospel, Basically, make their message attractive by the way they lived their everyday lives. And Paul urges them to live up to a standard that even the outside world would look at and say, yeah, that's good. The idea is simple. Your behavior is the ultimate proof of your belief. For any organization, its reputation is built on the daily conduct of its people. All right, let's zoom in now on the deeply personal side of all this, because behind the organizational strategy, there's a man, an aging Paul sitting in a cold, damp Roman prison cell. He's been abandoned by many of his friends, he's reflecting on his life's work, and he's facing his own mortality. This one line, this request to Timothy, is just so human. It strips away the towering theological figure and just shows us an old man who is cold and lonely and really wants his coat and his friend. It's a powerful reminder of the real person behind these words. And from that very same cell, he writes what is essentially his own epitaph. Now, this isn't him being arrogant. It's a statement of completion. He sees his life's race as finished. He's run his leg of the relay, and now he's desperately trying to pass the baton to make sure the work continues through the next generation, through people like Timothy. This quote right here gets to the absolute heart of Paul's final warning. Years before, he had actually prophesied to the leaders from Ephesus that the greatest danger to their church wouldn't be Roman persecution. No, it would be wolves rising up from within their own flock to destroy it. And now, in these final letters, he sees that terrible prophecy coming true. So here's the crucial takeaway from all of this. Whether we're talking about a first-century church, a modern company, a social movement, or even a family, the lesson from Paul's final mission is absolutely timeless. External pressures can actually forge strength, but the most significant threat, the one that requires real courage to face, is almost always the quiet fight against decay, against division, and the loss of purpose from within.